Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXC EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding, compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show where I'm delighted to be joined by Ron Bosma, co-founder of Talentin. I've known Ron for 10 years, and it's a pleasure to know Ron, I have to say. He is a legend in the human capital and staffing sector, plus Ron is great fun, as well as a highly efficient and effective operator and leader of companies. Ron, a very warm welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. How the hell are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine. Thanks, Connor, and thanks for having me. I think it's the first time that I join your podcast or your webinar, but that's I'm very pleased to join you in your session.
Well, Ron, you're most welcome, and I hope this is not the last time you're on the show because I think you're going to have a great story to tell. So Ron, you've been in the human capital and staffing sector for some time. I'd love to hear your story. How did you get into the sector? Your career, as I understand it, was for a large period with the Ronstadt group of companies. And I really can't wait to hear about that, Ron, and our audience, because from the outside looking in, the Ronstadt group of companies has a very special culture. And I think that came from the original founder. But listen, that's only my story. You lived and breathed it for many years. You were a key member of the company as it moved into new products. But Ron, what's your story? How did you become the co-founder, of course, of Talentin, which I want to hear about? But how did you get into this sector? What's your?
Yeah, I often say I'm a little bit born and raised in the HR services and staffing industry. I studied something totally different, but then I had a period in between. I'm looking for a temporary job, and I ended up at the office at the branch of Ronstadt. And I think after 10 minutes, I was working on the other side of the desk, placing people on platforms, digging for oil in the North Sea. And I thought, let's stay for a few months, and then I ending up being almost 32 years with Ronstadt.
Wow.
So that's a big journey. I think I started in '86 as a consultant, and I think that moment Ronstadt was just celebrating the 25th anniversary, and we were with I think we were 4 countries, and we had 200 branches, and we were close to 1,000 people, so a pretty small company. And when I left in 2016, I think we were with more than 5,000 branches.
Wow.
In 42 countries with 32,000 employees. So a big chunk of my, let's say, career within Ronstadt. I was part of a great journey over the last 30 years from Ronstadt. And even in that days, I worked together with, let's say, he passed away a few weeks ago. Yes. I worked together in some projects with Frits Goldsmeding. And that was interesting because from his study economy, he was a kind of entrepreneur in our business. Mm-hmm. And he was always thinking, if we are thinking 2 steps ahead, he was thinking 15 steps ahead.
Wow.
And trying to predict when the economy will go up and the percentage flex will go up, and invest during the time that it goes low, and invest on time to make that story great again. And unfortunately, he's passed away 3 weeks ago on his 90s, on the age of 90. So that was a big and great story.
Yes.
I learned a lot because it looks like long with Ronstadt, but if you see, I think we did a lot of internal development, but also if you look into the staffing market, or the recruitment market, it's involved pretty much in that 38 years.
Yes, Ron, it certainly has. And of course, to all our friends and former colleagues and partners in Ronstadt, we extend our condolences, because I was reading a lot about the founder, Mr. Goldsmith, and he seems like a remarkable man. And along with his team, he's built a phenomenal business and a phenomenal culture, which is the largest in the world, as I understand it, by market value and by turnover in the human capital services space. So it's a really impressive journey. Like, Ron, when you think back to your career with Ronstadt, like, I think, as I understand it, you set up one of the first MSP businesses of its kind with what became a Ronstadt SourceRight. Is that correct? And would you mind just telling us about that journey and what you've seen in the marketplace to make you go, this is what we need to do?
Now, that was more a coincidence, I think, at that time. I think it was 2010 or something. And then one of the board members came to me and said, hey, I sold something to a big client in the Netherlands, and it's called an MSP.
Yes.
To be honest, he told me that he wasn't aware of what an MSP was, but he sold it. And the good news was that the client probably also didn't well know what an MSP was. So we started developing, because that was something that was more common in the US and the UK. So we just start building out, let's say, out of 2010, the first client. And that same client, I think after a few years, we implemented that in 40 countries, running an MSP, supported by a VMS. So also that was a great story. And that was the foundation for Ronstadt SourceRight, fast growth, and now being market leader in the MSP and RPO space. But that was also a great story where I think the culture of Ronstadt, if they adapt a strategy or adapt a concept, they have the power and the people across the world to implement that concept on a straightforward way.
Yes.
And to develop that on the next stage.
Yeah, I think that's so true, Ron. It's very impressive organization, as are the people in it. But Ron, just coming back to Talentin, you're the co-founder there. You left Ronstadt after an amazing career there, after I think 32 years, you said. But would you mind, just for the benefit of our audience, Ron, telling us about Talentin and the sort of problems, challenges that you and your team solve for?
Yeah, after working, let's say 32 years on the provider side, I really want to help clients to make the right decision and to prepare. And it was a little bit, I did a lot of projects across Europe, across the world. And in most of the times you see a gap between what we call the business objectives and the development of, let's say, the talent acquisition role or the external workforce management. So what we do with Talentin is trying to bridge that gap and make sure that the talent acquisition strategy or the contingent workforce strategy is more aligned to the future objectives. Because during my Ronstadt period, I saw a lot of clients or organizations that they are focusing on trying to solve the problems from yesterday or today.
Yes.
And probably 20 years ago, that could be good because the labor market was pretty stable and pretty direct forward. And if you have a solution that could work out for another 5 years. But in the, let's say, the circumstances of today, it's continuous trying to get the strategy aligned with, let's say, all the developments in the labor market. And that's what we do day by day, even after being 38 years in the industry. That's my passion and where I enjoy it most of being part of it.
Yeah, Ron, I love what you and your team and your business do. I think it serves a really critical gap in the market, actually, and I think it adds so much value to the sector on an advisory basis. So, Ron, you mentioned 38 years in human capital, HR services, staffing, right? And all economies are cyclical in some way. So I'm sure you've seen the boom and bust. You've seen companies have multiple war for talent over the nearly 40 years period, the talent scarcity problem. And I know you and I have talked privately around the labour market paradox, which really emerged from the COVID pandemic time, whereby essentially there was loads of jobs and not enough people to do the jobs. And in fact, that trend seems to have continued with countries like the Netherlands, UK, Ireland, USA, Germany, Poland being at almost or actually at full employment. But a lot of companies are still hiring like it's going out of fashion. It's going gangbusters, to use that phrase, Ron. And there seems to be a huge gap between the demand for talent and the supply for talent. And of course, some of these things are cyclical, but some, in my view, seem to be more structural, right? Around demographics, labor arbitrage, migration, immigration. But my question really is the following, Ron. What in your view has caused this? And do you think there's any strategies or tactics that governments or organizations or both can employ to solve this particular set of challenges?
Yeah. I always say that let's say in the labor market, there's not one paradox, but there are many paradoxes. So, and especially if you're looking across EMEA and the UK, every country is in a different situation.
True.
We're still looking to Spain with an unemployment rate of 12%, as in the Netherlands is 3.6. I think in the UK you are 3.8. So we really feel the scarcity, and the good news and the bad news is scarcity will stay. So I think for a long time, and especially during COVID, everyone thought, okay, it will go back to normal, but it will not go back to normal because scarcity will be there, and that's the demographics and what you see geographical. It's there to stay. So we have to find out different ways to sort that problems. And one of them could be with AI disabling jobs and move that people train their skills and move them to different jobs, because that will happen over the coming years. On the same time, I see a big paradox about, let's say, young people that want to work differently on their time, on their location, on a flexible way, on different projects. So that group is really growing. In most of the countries, you see the number of self-employed growing. At the same time, you see every government is trying to regulate this population, because the number of people that work in a traditional perm job are getting less. And in most countries, the whole social security system is built up the fact that 80% of the people are working in a perm job. So I think we have a kind of mix of many paradoxes, and there's not one solution. So no. Because there will be an economic downturn and upturn, but scarcity will stay. So we have to find the right palette of solutions and navigating through the wind in the labor market to be sure we're going forward instead of going backwards, if you're talking in sailing terms. And that has to do, you see now over the last years, everyone is looking to do skills recruitment instead of traditional recruitment on CV, on education. And some countries more or less, but that's probably one of the solutions that would help to at least make the best of it out of the people that are available and the requirements of jobs that are needed. But that's also, probably across Europe, there are a lot of discussions about migrations.
Yes.
And to be honest, we need migrants to do all the work.
Yes.
That's the same in the Netherlands as you have in the UK. Your healthcare system and everything is still traditional, and you need the resources to do so. Yeah,
Ron, I completely agree. Sorry, Ron, I interrupted. Go ahead.
So that's most important, I think, is it will be a stormy weather if you look into the labor market, and you have to sail close to the wind and maneuver every time to do the best and decide on where should we execute the work? How can we organize the work? Can we organize it differently with AI? And how can we train the skills of the people out there or are not there, but they are in another part of the world but that has also, in my view, a big managerial impact. Because to be honest, in my time, the managerial was you had people in a branch and you're trying to train them and help them and support them. And with people working in different time zones across the world, then you're probably also as a manager need different skills to get these projects up and running and do the work done.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does, Ron. And actually, I agree with pretty much everything you've outlined there, Ron. There's a couple of things actually I'd love to maybe go a bit deeper in if we can, Ron, because I think you raise a really great point. If we look back to the traditional employment model that you referenced, governments, you're right, their taxation and social security systems are set up for the traditional full-time employed worker, she or he, or that, whatever you want to say, doing the 9-to-5 job or 9 to 7, whatever the hell it is, right? But interesting enough, Ron, in my view, the insurance, banking, financial services sector are set up for those jobs too. So if you're an independent contractor, freelancer, and you accept your hypothesis that that sector is likely to grow, those people are essentially disenfranchised from traditional financial services on a general basis. Would you agree with that, Ron? And is there potentially an opportunity for companies to step in to solve that problem?
Absolutely. That's what you already see in the market. Because the challenge is how do you connect the dots and how do you remove the barriers that are there? And of course, you see over the last 2 or 3 years, you see the what the market calls EOR companies are popping up and putting something is. You see, I think in the UK, but also across Europe, you see insurance companies trying to shore that up. But still, we have, let's say, if I want to work 4 months from Spain on a project, I'm still got limited in the period because I have to pay taxes over there. And even if you're able to pay taxes in Spain, you're already 6 months ahead trying to get that arranged. So
yes,
there will be a huge industry that will try to combine the dots and make it possible for everyone, but that's still trial and error. And it doesn't help that most of the governments are, let's say, sticking to the old traditional way of social security, insurance, pensions, all that kind of stuff. But I'm sure they will find a way to get, let's say, probably not as the highest level as it is today, but there will be legislation where it's possible to try to organize work on a different way.
Yeah, I agree with that, Ron. The other thing you mentioned was potentially the work could be done in other geographies, Ron, but there is that managerial risk. I agree with that. And I think it's interesting how some companies have made a bet. They've looked at the demographics in places like India, continental Africa, Nigeria, Egypt, Ghana, Sudan, Ethiopia, Ronstadt, Cisco. They've made significant investments down there. And I suppose their bet is, well, if we can't bring the people into Europe or United States, well, at least we can engage them remotely and they can provide the service there. Do you think, Ron, that trend will continue, that labor arbitrage model will continue?
Absolutely. That's the only solution. If you can do a lot, but that's all a percentage of what the problem is. So you still have to make sure that, for example, Ethiopia, I know Google and the Apple's trying to invest in that area because there's a huge population that needs work and is really happy to be educated to do that work. I think from a managerial end of view, we have to get used to different cultures and how do you manage different cultures.
Yes.
And the time zone is probably the easiest one, but how do you managerial manage the culture difference between UK and Ethiopia or Sweden and South Africa? That's probably at our age, that's probably still a challenge, but I think the younger generation, Generation Z, hopefully they get more used to it. And I see already, even on the friends zone where people trying to find friends, it's already different than we did traditionally around where you are born and lived. So I'm pretty sure it will stay and it will develop and mature.
Yeah, I think so too. Like, Ron, one of the things I wanted to talk about was some of the legislation and regulation in the gig economy or the platform economy. It's interesting. You've got some huge companies that have sought to platformize how work is done. You've got companies like Upwork, Freelancer.com, Fiverr, the list goes on. But then you've got some of the platforms like Uber, Deliveroo, Glovo, Just Eat Takeaway, I think are headquartered in Netherlands. Ron, but from my perspective, and I'd be keen to hear yours, I think that's a sector that actually needs some regulation. Even though I'm a capitalist, right? I like people's ability to make money and provide work. But from my perspective, it has to be a fair bargain, right? And if you look at the gig economy, and this is quite a crude analysis in the platform economy, I think you've got two tiers within it, Ron. You've got the low choice, no choice workers that are typically lower paid, have less bargaining power, less negotiation power, and they're typically in precarious jobs, right? They can be fired pretty quickly, right? And then you've got the high choice, high negotiation, high cost type of workers, Ron, that can pretty much work wherever they want, name their price. So the low choice, no choice workers, my view is I think they need some protection. And I welcome things like the EU directive on platform workers. But things like that have an unintended consequence for the high choice, high cost workers, because that reduces their ability potentially to act as an independent contractor. So my question is, Ron, do you feel that the gig and platform economy should be better regulated?
In general, yes, that's the answer. But I think the gig economy and the platforms are most of the times by the governance putting on one bucket. It isn't the one bucket. So the forced people that are working as self-employed is a totally different group of people on the high educated. So one of the examples we see and still in the discussions in the Netherlands is that we trying to say, all right, you have a minimum bill rate.
Yes.
If it's below the 35 euros, it's expect to be not on a free will. It's expected to be a perm job. So you cannot be self-employed below the rate, but that's still, we have a new government. So that's still under discussions. But I think that's where every government are struggling. The self-employed doesn't exist, or the gig worker doesn't exist. You have so many appearances of these people that it couldn't fit in one regulation. And especially if you're looking to the Netherlands, out of, let's say, 8-9 million workers, we have 1.2 million self-employed.
Wow.
But that 1.2 million self-employed are probably 200,000 people that works with the Ubers and the Deliveroos and all that kind of stuff. We have people that are self-employed and selling products or making products and not selling hours. So it's a diverse group. And that's probably also the challenge. That's probably where also our government or our companies that make regulations are not just that used to, because, hey, it was, when I was raised up, it was traditional. You have a job for 20 years and you stay for 20 years. And
yes,
and that will be sorted out. And but the challenge is, if you sort it out for one country, what now happening is with the AR35 and in the Netherlands and in Germany and France, how then you support the gig economy that goes cross-border and how you manage these differences. So I think we go a little bit further away from one talent market, probably for a certain time.
Yeah, I agree. Ron, I think that's an excellent point that you make, particularly that last point. I mean, what happens when all these regulations are either differing or converging? You know, will companies go to the Wild West where there isn't any regulations? Will they be penalized for going to the Wild West where there is no regulations? I think there's so many unintended consequences of how this is regulated today. I agree with you. So, Ron, as we've discussed a number of times already on today's show, a long and successful career in the staffing and HR services sector. So I don't quite have 36 to 38 years experience, Ron, but I've been nearly 20 years in this sector, which I know it looks like I've been in it for longer, right? If it's been a hard time, but in all seriousness, it struck me when I came into recruitment and staffing that it was highly inefficient, Ron, right? With a limited degree of innovation, even though the lack of sophistication, innovation, and inefficiency, actually, I was able to make that to be successful in it, right? Because how talent is found through brokers or recruitment companies or intermediaries. It's a process that allows people, like certain people, to succeed. If you can control the candidate, you've got access to the candidates, you can control the market, right? In a way. So when I came into it, I came from the legal career, which was even more old school, right, Ron? So when I looked at the recruitment sector, I was thinking, okay, they got CRM, they got email, they've just moved from the fax machine, from couriering or posting CVs to emailing them, to ATS, to VMS, all these things. Now we've got talent marketplaces. But it struck me that the sector, whilst it's evolved in some ways, Ron, hasn't really evolved in a big bang way. It's been incremental change over time. It's still essentially a recruiter working to fulfill a job, right? Of course, there's a lot of tech around it now, but it's the same principle, right? And I'm not sure that's the most efficient way.
Absolutely.
Love it.
No, that's I fully agree.
Yeah.
And it goes step by step, but it's also going too slow. I think the industry is not ready to really transform to the next stage because they don't know how, and probably no one knows how. I remember, I think it was around 2000 with Ronstadt. I think we tried to build a whole online staffing agency.
Yes.
And we spent, I think it was 30 million euros in that staffing agency so that employees and clients could enter the data together themselves.
Wow.
And just, I think there was a help desk to support something. And that was 2000. And then we brought it to market. But then you see that candidates wants to have the high touch and wants to be supported in their choices. And even clients, that they like that they see online everything, but they want to get someone to make the choice for them.
Yes.
So I think we trying to push that to the Netherlands, push that to the UK, early days 2000. And then we stopped the whole investment because the industry was probably not ready and we were too early.
Yes.
But also the two client ends were also not ready to, and that's, I think, is changing. If you see, I have kids from the Gen Z population, and they work with a telephone and they do everything, and they are used to it. And so if these groups are coming to market and coming to our industry, then probably it will innovate a little bit faster.
Yes.
That's also, if you're working in the staffing industry, it's to be honest, in general, it's a low margin industry. We are not a Philips or an ASML. We are earning a lot of money if you can get a lot of volume. So changing the way you work has a big risk in it.
Yes.
So that's also the reason that we make step-by-step improvements to improve the productivity or to improve the client experience or the candidate experience. But we're not making big steps on that one.
I agree. Ron, it's interesting to me that Ronstadt have acquired two talent marketplaces or matching machines, if you like. They acquired Twago, I think, back in 2016, 2017, around that time. I'm not sure the exact date, but somewhere in that time frame. And then more recently, they acquired a platform called Torque. headed up by Mike Morris out of the USA. Again, a marketplace of sorts. It strikes me that the staffing sector has a real risk of being disintermediated by talent marketplaces or platforms that can do the job of a staffing or recruitment company potentially faster, definitely cheaper,
Absolutely,
and potentially better. And my thoughts are the same principles might apply actually to vendor management systems, MSPs to an extent. Would you think that the talent marketplaces potentially have an opportunity to leapfrog the staffing provider, the MSP and the VMS, and start to integrate directly into the large enterprises, and therefore the need for a large human HR services staffing provider is no longer required?
Oh, on the long term, absolutely. The technology can and will replace a lot of pieces, but don't forget that there's also, if you outsource your external workforce management, you're not only outsource the sourcing part or the contracting part, you also outsource the risk.
Yes.
And that's the same with, let's say, self-driving cars. They can drive everywhere.
Yeah.
But what's the insurance to, is that the car producer that has the risk, or is it the me buying a self-driving car, or is it anyone else? Is it the construction way that they constructed the way on a different way? So, and that's the same with the recruitment industry, especially in staffing, that companies also outsource the risk of hiring people, the employment risk or the supplier risk or all that kind of stuff. And that's not easily replaceable because the technology industry, like VMSs or ATSs, are probably not able to step in that risk piece, because most of the software, the providers are risk avoidance.
Yes.
They don't want to take risks. They want to take someone else the risk. So
yes.
At the end, I am fully supporting your view on the future. And it will happily for probably 80-90%, but still there are, let's make the analogy with the self-driving car.
Yeah.
It's almost perfect. It drives better than me, but it isn't still there.
Yes. It's so true. Do you know, Ron, that's a bloody great analogy. I love it.
Yeah. And it's also in the industry. So yeah. Who takes that responsibility?
Yeah.
And even in recruitment, normally you agree with the client if he stops within the 2 months, you have to recruit him again. You cannot say to an ATS and say, hey, we want to have a free recruitment.
No.
So that's the industry themselves. We are not innovative enough most times to get it. Let's say, of course, we do all kind of developments in specific areas, but it doesn't change the 80% of, let's say, the traditional industry.
Yeah, I agree. Like, Ron, just if you would indulge me for a moment, right? But say you were the CEO of one of the top 10 staffing providers that have, a couple of billion in turnover. What would you advise them to do to get ready for some of these changes if they're not doing it already?
I think most important is to learn from all these new developments and learn enough before your transition.
Yes.
Because we think that's the same with AI. Of course, it pops up everywhere. But there is no one, I think, in our industry that really changed the industry with bringing AI in. Of course, it helps on certain tasks or certain topics. You cannot follow the developments enough because it's there and it's rapidly going on. But before you can really transform your business model to that new model, I think that this one thing: experiment, try out, and learn from all that experience.
Yeah, I love that advice, Ron.
And to translate that to Ronstadt, I think in 2010, I think Ronstadt founded the Innovation Fund.
Yes.
Not to invest in companies to make money, but to invest in companies that are disrupting the industry and learn how that works.
Yes.
Learn how what you call the TWACOs and the talent platforms are disrupting small pieces, and learn how that impacts your client engagement, how your candidate experience, and then trying to make it. You have one chance to only make it right in most companies, and that's always refer to Nokia. They were a well brand, and everyone had a nice Nokia 6010 or something, and they are not there anymore. So they missed the opportunity, and probably the easiest example, but that's also in our industry.
Yeah,
it can go fast.
Yeah,
it can go fast the wrong way.
Yeah, I agree, and you don't want to be on the wrong side of that bet, Ron. To your point, but I think the innovation fund idea that Ronstadt had, Ron, was a smashing idea. I thought it was excellent, and I know we've got a mutual friend in Hancock that was engaged in the Ronstadt Innovation Fund, and he's doing amazing work in a new organization. But just speaking of, Yeah, it's interesting, Ron, if you think of companies such as Head First, that are a bit, the way I describe them, and I admire them as a company, by the way, I don't mind going on the record to say that, but they remind me a bit of, you remember that game from the 1980s on computers, Pac-Man? They come and gobble little bits up.
Pac-Man, yes.
And I love their model, and it's a model that works, right? And the most recent Pac-Man, of course, was the acquisition of the Impellium Group, or some of their assets, which is... blockbuster. But my question actually doesn't relate to Head First. It relates more to the sector, Ron, the HR services and human capital sector and staffing. Do you expect there to be a lot of consolidation in the sector as it becomes more disintermediated, and of course AI and other disruptors start to disrupt the sector? Do you expect that to be the case?
There will be I think the consolidation is already going on, and that will go on for, let's say, the upcoming period. And that's also what you a little bit see in the industry. It's that it's in the early days you had providers that do high-end staffing, and you had providers that they only do contracting of self-employed, and now it's evolving and emerging as everyone is going left and right to the different solutions and products, or by themselves acquiring all these kind of new products, or make alliances with companies that are like yourself, like CXC, that are filling in the gap that the staffing industry has.
Yes.
Because, to be honest, staffing industry is born and raised on a local country level. And as long as it is, let's say, depending on individual recruiters, what you said, it will be more or less local businesses. So what can you add from new developments, new products, and that will go on.
Yeah.
And probably it will be accelerating due to the technology possibilities that are in.
Yeah, I agree with your analysis, Ron. Ron, we've discussed briefly artificial intelligence today, but I want to maybe delve a bit deeper, if you're okay with that. And really, I've been reading a lot. Good, thanks, Ron. I've been reading a lot about its potential unintended consequences, and the World Economic Forum released a really interesting report in 2023 in the third or fourth quarter, I think, from memory, and essentially, their report related to artificial intelligence and artificial general intelligence negative impact on jobs. And specifically, they looked at what could be called white collar, the stereotypical middle class, upper middle class jobs, the accountants, tax people, lawyers. And in short, what the report was saying, to summarize, was that 60% of those jobs will be adversely affected or impacted by artificial general intelligence, which is quite scary. And the more scary thing about the report or their analysis, Ron, was that they did not have a solution for this, right? This displacement or adverse impact. So my question is as follows, Ron. Are you concerned about artificial intelligence, artificial general intelligence, and automation, and its potential impact on jobs, and specifically jobs displacement of jobs?
Yeah. Maybe one remark up front. Most of these prediction and reports, I think they overestimate the impact in the coming 4 to 5 years.
Yes.
And in general, they underestimate the impact in 10, 15 years. So on the short term, I'm a little bit, I'm not in the category that thinks that it will change over next 2 or 3 or 4 years. But that will take time. On the long term, it will happen, and it will. But the good news, if you're looking to the demographics, we need all that kind of disabling jobs and create new jobs and reskill people. That's for sure. In let's say the European or this geographically where we have a lack of people. We have a risk that there are not enough young people born to get the job done, even in healthcare. So
yes.
I think it's a risk in some countries. It's a risk for some jobs. But if you close a door, it always also opens new doors. So I think I'm not scared about it. I think it's a chance. It's a chance to develop and to create new jobs and new skills. And of course, that puts a pressure on development of people. So you don't have to be, in the early days, your training and scale up must intend to bring you in your own role on the next level. And then now I think in the future, you have to be educated, skilled on another job.
Yes.
Because your job will be not any more available or not there. So I'm not scared about the number of displacements. I think we need that displacements.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in some jobs, and even in our recruitment industry, the bias is still a hot topic. And if you see legislation that goes up, that's also one remark that will push back a little bit, let's say, the speed of the developments.
Yes. Yes. I really like the way you've answered that question, Ron. I always enjoy how you think about things and then present them, Ron. I like that it's potentially a necessity due to the demographic problems and issues like the demographic deficit or demographic drought. So I think that's really a fair comment. It's a bit like, I think it was Schumpeter who talked about creative destruction in economies, that actually good things could come from that destruction. So I think it's a great response, Ron. Thank you. Ron, one of the things I want to touch on, right? So when I started my career, particularly in law or the legal world, but then when I moved into recruitment or staffing, particularly in recruitment or staffing, I couldn't understand why I couldn't do that job from anywhere, right? As long as I was on the same time zone. It used to really piss me off, Ron, going into this trading floor where I had to be one of 100 people on the phones all the time. And I was thinking, well, why can't I do this from my bedroom or my home? So I've always been a fan of remote work. And when we set up this business in Europe, our intention was to have a distributed workforce. No, we had offices, but we didn't care if people went in. We judged them on efficiency, effectiveness, not whether they were present or not. We wanted a flexible environment. Now, I appreciate that doesn't work for every company. That doesn't work for every individual. But personally speaking, that's what it is of interest to me, right? But what's your thoughts on remote work, Ron, and has it changed over the years?
Yeah, I think it's due to COVID. Probably it's more that made a big step forward because we are forced to do it, and then it was. I will see with a lot of companies after that we got to reduce offices and everything else, so it became a kind of holy grail in that one.
Yes.
On the other end, I see now a lot of companies having debates or discussions with the Labor Council, everyone else, that they want to bring people back to work. Say, hey, you have to work at least 3 or 4 days at the offices. And that's where we discussed earlier. That's a managerial problem. How do you control your culture? How do you develop your culture? Working together with people. That's still working from, let's say, across all the world in different time zones with different cultures. That's still something we haven't sorted out.
Yeah, I agree. And Ron, when you were in your Ronstadt days, was it more office based or headquarter based job, or were you working remotely, or were you on the road a lot? Probably on the road a lot, I would guess, or in airports.
No, yeah, I was lucky in 2010 where we started up SourceRight. That were all international clients. So
Yes.
we were forced to work remotely with teams cross over the world with different cultures. If you have to implement across 5 countries, it doesn't make sense to bring someone in.
Yes.
So we were probably one of the early adopters, but still, if you're looking to the staffing market traditionally, they still have offices in every country, in every big city. They're probably not what we call on A locations in the shopping street anymore. But
Yes.
they're still centralized, working on offices. I think, yeah, it becomes more and more global. But that's also with, let's say, the good things and the challenges.
Yes.
So I got used to it. But to be honest, sometimes it's nice to be in an office instead of being the whole day. Although the view over here is pretty well.
Yeah. It's lovely, Ron. I'd say you're based. Are you based on the coast, Ron? Are you near the water? Yes.
I live in the city center of Rotterdam, in the Netherlands.
Wow.
So not on the coast, but if you're looking outside, you see the big river.
Oh wow, I love it.
Or, I already got, let's say, for 15 years used to working online with teams across the world.
Yeah. I think if it's done correctly, Ron, it can work exceptionally well for all the reasons you mentioned. Ron, one of the things that I've become mildly obsessed with is the HR tech sector. And as you'll appreciate, there's hundreds of solutions. Oftentimes, they're almost like single point solutions, right? They've been designed for a specific purpose, but they don't talk to something else, or if they do, it's not done very well. And in the period 2021, I think we've seen the biggest ever investment in the HR tech sector. I think it was nearly $13 billion US dollars. The next year, I think it was just around the 12 billion mark, and then the next year it dropped off a cliff as the quantitative easing from the European Central Bank and the Federal Reserve began to ease. But my question is, do you feel that HR tech investment was a bubble, Ron, or do you think it was a necessary response to market conditions around the move from on-premise working to remote working to workers being based in bloody Ethiopia to Beirut to Belfast to Brazil? What's your take on it, Ron?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I think it's driven by, let's say, all the developments in the market and working remotely. So I think we made a big step forward with all kind of technology. But be aware that was also in the time that's let's say investment money was for free. Eh? So if the bank pays you 0% or even charge you cost on to have money on the bank, so everyone was trying to make some use of this money, and that's a little bit where you see that's where you saw all the startups like Netflix and everyone else making any profit, but still trying to connect investors to get the next step.
Yes,
that's changed because money cost money. So now every investment there is a calculation. How does it compare against the 4 or 5% that I can make on with the bank or the stock on the stock exchange? So that's also a driving factor that we see less investment in technology, new technologies.
Yes,
and I think that's also has to do with, let's say, the adoption grade of all that newer technology. I think in the days I worked with Ronstadt, there was a time that I think every quarter 700 new technologies came to market. And we know for sure that out of that 700, 500 disappeared within a year.
Yes.
So that also demonstrates that the adoption of all that new technologies is still a struggle to get that place on the market where you can make volume and be more sustainable to future.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Ron. So, Ron, as we bring our conversation to a close...
May I make one remark on the...
Yes, please. Please.
Make one remark on the previous point on remote working or not. What I think is still a challenge is working with, let's say, on and off-site teams in meetings together. So that's I often been in meetings where you have 10 people in one room and you're the only one that's sitting through your screen, and then you don't feel part of the discussions. You don't hear anything. So that's also an area where technology probably brings us or supports us in the coming years to make that more smooth, because you're pretty disconnected with, let's say, what's happening in the room. If it's a meeting for a few hours and you're the only one on screen.
Yeah, I think that's a tremendous point, Ron, and one I agree with. And I hope that things like virtual reality will make that a reality so that people don't feel left out or excluded from the conversation, because, you know, that old phrase that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's so true, right? It's so true. Yeah. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. It's one of those ones that unfortunately is correct. But Ron, as I'd like to bring our conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, Ron. I love all our interactions, and also, Ron, a big thanks to you, because when I was starting my career at CXC, I know I've said this before, but you were very kind to give me your time, and you didn't have to do that, and it wasn't necessary. So I always appreciate that, Ron. So thank you for that indeed. But Ron, go ahead. Sorry, Ron, I interrupted. Sorry.
No, just thank you for having me. And I still remember 10 years ago, I think it was in Hyde Park Hotel or something. But that's okay.
Yeah, Ron, it was. You've got a great memory too, and I always appreciate that. So thank you, mate. But Ron, I want to finish with a question we ask all of our guests, Ron, which is, what is your prediction for the future of work?
Yeah, that's a good question, and probably also the most challenging question to answer, because it will be defined by our own flexibility, adaptability. There will be a lot of new technology and continuous learning and experimental, and I think we need to embrace hybrid working. And with that, I think I said it before during this meeting, we have to sail close to the wind. So we have to navigate. You're in the UK and I'm in the Netherlands, but if you're sailing between these countries, the wind always changes in every quarter, and that's probably related to future work. It will be continuously be involved by labor developments, governments that come up with new regulation, technology that pops in and brings possibilities, but also brings us the let's say the state how to make the big step. So it will be a challenging time. I think that's the good news over the last years. Where normally, I think demand was let's say the central point. I think now the talent is so talent centricity in the future of work will be more important, and it will. I think it will stay at the center.
Yeah, I agree with you, Ron. And Ron, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on all our topics today. But thanks also for a lovely way to close our conversation in the show. Ron, a big thanks to you. I appreciate it. I've enjoyed your company, as I always do, and I enjoyed our conversation. So, Ron, as the co-founder of Talentin, where is the best place for our audience to reach out to you should they want to hear more about what you can do to help their organization? Where's the best place to reach out?
Just go to our website, talentin.eu, and trying to connect or on LinkedIn. So that's people will know where to find me.
I love it. Well, Ron, thanks so much. And Ron, looking forward to seeing you in person soon. And thanks again for joining the show. It was a really enjoyable conversation. So continued success to you.
Yes, same to you. And thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.